Goel Hadam. There's something important. There used to be, I think there was a rabbi in the Gush and other places, victims of terror who are suddenly very forgiving, strangely forgiving of their enemies, Like they call for reconciliation, other things, and trying to not go down to the levels. I think many people are frustrated. Look, we cannot judge people who are grieving over the murder of their loved ones. But also we have to know that perhaps someone has to be upset by something. There's a mitzvah of Goel Hadam. I have to thank Rabbi Weissman for pointing this out. He sent that letter telling people, did you know that there's a mitzvah to punish murderers? And it says here that you're supposed to put the guy to death. Nakomi nakem. Kol al reig nefesh, the Rambam says, right beginning, Rotzeach Shmiras Nefesh. Rambam says, you're supposed to punish murderers. Kol reig nefesh Adam Yisrael aver below taseh. Someone kills a Jew, that's a prohibition. It says here, V'im ratzach b'zedom b'fnei aidim mitato b'sayev. If he killed this person in front of witnesses, whether Jew or non-Jew, the perpetrator, he is to be executed by the sword. That means decapitated, at least the way Chazal understood it. Technically speaking, maybe firing squad would count nowadays also. Why? Because Chazal said the halacha calls for taking a metal implement and killing him with it by, causing bodily harm, as opposed to burning him or choking him or stoning him. Right?
I would think that it would count as skila.
No, it doesn't count as skila, because skila doesn't mean literally stoning. It means throwing him from a high place, letting him die from blunt force trauma. So Chazal said you have to kill him with metal, and the cleanest, easiest way to kill a person with metal violence is by decapitation. It says beror lo mitayafa, because he's your brother. Find the nicest way to do it to him. That's their rule. But if you could, let's say, just shoot him a few times, maybe that's a cleaner way of doing it. I don't know. Okay, I'm just saying that's technically considered.
How would a bullet count as a sword?
Because made out of metal. Metal implements, the same stabbing mechanism. Because I'll learn to maybe stab him like they used to do in war. And they also say same with burning. What's the nicest way to burn someone to death? So they used to do it, right? Yes. No, not an auto da fe. That's disgusting type of thing. So what did they do? They used to just make sure hold him still. They say put him into a pile of manure, like hold him still in the mud or whatever, and pinch his nose until he opens up, and then pour the molten lead down his throat. Technically that's burning, but it doesn't result in an immolation of the person. And they said same thing with strangulation and stoning. Okay, either way, it's kind of difficult if you have to kill someone. There's going to be physical harm here. The point is, it's reasonable to say that firing squad or shooting, someone would be part of this death. What they don't have in Misas Beis Din, by the way? Hanging.
That was strangulation.
No, strangulation. No, when hanging is done right in the Western world, and whatever, Pharaoh used to do this, and what Pharaoh is described, by the way, it's hanging. When it says he hung his the Saraofim, we translate as hanging, but Onkelos calls it sliva, which means impalation, and crucifixion is a form of impalation. That's also not allowed. Okay, crucifixions and impalations are not allowed. Apparently, maybe that's what also they did to Haman. But generally speaking, hanging as practiced in the Western world causes the neck to break. Okay? That's not strangulation. A proper hanging results in the perpetrator, or I guess the criminal, the rebel, being put to death by having his neck summarily broken and being just killed like that. And if you botch it, it leads to strangulation, which is not something they want, or it could lead to decapitation. So don't try this at home. Either way, that's not the strangulation that Chazal referred to. Okay? So I'm just saying that there is room for this.
Then what was the strangulation like referring to?
What?
Then what was it?
And what was it? Same thing. They stick the guy in a pile of manure or whatever so he can't move, and they tie handkerchiefs around his neck and fasten the ropes so that the ropes don't leave marks or whatever, so it's spreads out the force. And they tie one rope to that ox and one rope to that ox and just have him go in opposite direction so it just strangles him. Okay? Yeah, that's what the Mishnah describes. Right. So they used to do this. I mean, technically speaking, they didn't do this. Misas Beis Din was not inflicted that often, by the way. So much so that it could very well be, we discussed this before, that there's, I think, 5 people are on the historical record as having been executed according to halacha in Jewish courts. All right, how many people do you know? Not that many. The last time a Jewish court, which wasn't even functioning as an actual Torah court, executed a person was in the 1960s. That was Eichmann, and they hung him. So they weren't doing it according to Torah law. Eichmann was not tried according to Torah law, and and he was not killed according to Torah law. According to Torah law, he should have just been like Agag, what they did to Agag. Sayef, what? He's a guy. Guy who killed Jews, they hung him. And he was supposed to have gotten the Agag treatment. So Agag, it says, Vaishasef Shmuel Agag. Samuel chopped him up. He used the sword. Okay.
Oh.
So that's what they're supposed to do. So they didn't do it. Okay. So back to the Goel Hadam, it says mitzvah biad Goel Hadam. It's a mitzvah of the Goel Hadam. Who's the Goel Hadam? Redeemer of the blood, or the avenger in this case. Shneimar Goel Hadam hu yamitz haroseach. V'chol roi l'rusha hu Goel Hadam. Who is the Goel Hadam? Anybody who's fit to inherit the property of the deceased. Someone's been murdered. The Goel Hadam has the commandment to put the murderer to death. Okay? And then the Rambam continues, Lo ratzah Goel Hadam, o shelo hayah yachol amitho, o she'ein lo Goel Hadam. By the way, why do we learn this in the Rambam? Because if we had to take out Makos and Sanhedrin now, there'd be a lot of details that we don't need. And it's not discussed in Shulchan Aruch, or let's say the Torah. So we're using the Rambam as a shorthand for the Torah Shabbal Peh because he is our teacher. So he explains that if you can't, the Goel Hadam can't do it. O shelo hayah yachol amitho. He doesn't either. He doesn't want to. I guess he's chicken, or maybe he's a woman. There's no male Goel Hadam. So what do? So it's a mitzvah to someone else. There's no Goel Hadam. Let's say it was a ger. Ger Tzedek has been murdered. There was a case in Brooklyn. It was a ger Tzedek, a guy. I think it was a black fellow who worked at a liquor store in Flatbush, and he was held up, and they killed him. They didn't give him a chance to even give the money, and he was buried back in the Caribbean. I remember the Chaver Kadishim from Brooklyn went down to make a special plot for him, according to Jewish minhag, back where his family was from. So that person doesn't have a Goel Hadam, halachically speaking. He didn't have children yet. Beit Din mimitim et harotzeach b'sayif. So Beis Din has to put him to death. Wait a minute, the Goel Hadam is supposed to inflict the death penalty on this guy. It says the Goel Hadam first kills him. And if the Goel Hadam can't or won't or doesn't exist, the court puts him to death by the sword. Wait a minute, are we supposed to have due process? It says here that everybody deserves a due process before anybody could kill an avenger. A vigilante relative can't do this. Basically saying the Goel Hadam can basically kill him any way he wants if the Goel Hadam is actually doing its legitimacy. And when is that? Right when it happens, the guy has to run to Ir Miklat. That is the killer so he gets a chance to prove his innocence or at least show that he was shogeg. Then the Beis Din sends back. They bring him to court with an entourage so he doesn't get killed, and they give him a proper trial. And if they exonerate him, he's exonerated, and that's it. No one can touch him. And
I'm allowed to kill him before he gets to the city of refuge.
So right at the beginning, apparently, yes, that's the first thing he has to do. Is run to the city of refuge, because if he did bring about this guy, everybody knows he brought about the guy's death. That's not the dispute. Question is, was he shogeg or mazid, or perhaps totally it wasn't his fault to begin with? So that's what the Beis Din has to determine. If he's exonerated because it may have been done by him, but totally wasn't his fault, so he gets off free. And if they find that he was mazid, he was a murderer, so the Beis Din will put him to death or let the Goel Hadam actually kill him, in a proper official execution. But if they find that he's shogeg, they'll give an entourage to bring him back to Ir Miklat, and they'll tell him, if you leave Ir Miklat on purpose, the Goel Hadam can kill you. And if anybody else happens to kill you also, we're not going to hold them accountable. So apparently Goel Hadam is supposed to be involved in this. And the Beis Din actually appoints a Goel Hadam officially. If there is no Goel Hadam, they're supposed to find it. You have to act as the Goel Hadam. You're the one who's supposed to kill this guy. And it gives a case here. What about close relatives? A close relative killed someone, so they have to appoint another relative. Like basically, have the case of a grandson who's appointed Goel Hadam to avenge his father's death upon his grandfather. That's a crazy case. I hope it never happens, but just a technical halakha. Beis Din has been warned not to take a bribe, blood money, basically, from the murderer. They can't say, you know what, let him do some other form of penance. We'll give him a long prison sentence, community service, something, bail. There's no such thing. Some sort of money, kofer, the word kapara, right? Let's say we'll give all the money in the world. And the Redeemer of the blood is willing to accept it. You know what? Let's say this is the exact case. The Goel Hadam says a thing like, I don't want to go down to his level. He was music. Goldum says, you know what? I don't want to. It's not going to bring about peace or something, some other nonsense, you know. Or we should find the killer's closest relatives and donate our kidneys to his relatives who need it, just to show that we have no hard feelings. Okay, other such ridiculous ideas. The soul of this deceased person, the person who's killed, is not the property of the Goel Hadam. The family cannot forgive. There's no such thing as a family forgiving the murderer, the murdered one's death. Ela Kinyana Kadosh Baruch Hu. The one who was killed, you know who was the owner? The Holy One, blessed be He. Shnemar v'lo tikhu kofer lenefesh roseach. Do not take kofer, blood money, for the instead of the life of the roseach. You can't say the roseach is the murderer. You can't say the murderer is going to give some sort of, like I said, indulgence. And that'll be his that'll atone for what he did. No such thing. There's nothing that the Torah. All those are on a lower level. Sometimes you even let people get away with.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.